Welcome to Kimberly Ann Craft. This is part 2 of sewing a ball gown using a dressmaker. In part 1 we formed the dress, and this part 2 shows how I'm adding the lace onto the dress. I'm going to hand sew this on, but the pinning on the dress form makes sure that the lace is perfectly placed and perfectly folded and perfectly positioned and pleated so that it looks exactly how I want it to in the final result. I'm just pinning it here loosely and making sure that the lace is laid out symmetrically. I'm then pinning in 4 places at the hips, in the front, and then in the centre at the back, just bringing up the excess so that the length of the lace at the bottom of the dress lines up with the dress itself. I'm then going to form all the excess to how I want it to be. This shows it at the back, putting the pins in to hold the excess in place. As I go, I'm constantly adjusting and shifting the lace to make sure it's behaving itself and going exactly where I want it to. Here you can see I'm making sure that the lace doesn't come up too much of an excess on the underarm area where it would irritate me as I wore it. Next comes the forming of the lace. It's going to have a ruched effect, so effectively I'm going one side to the other, taking an inch at a time, folding up and pinning in place. I'll hand sew this later. I do this 3 or 4 times on each side, alternating as I go, so that it's not asymmetric, which of course is one form that you may want, but not in this dress for me. I then go and take care of the back of the dress, because it's still all loose and hanging off, which is obviously not the desired result. I make sure that the top of the dress looks symmetrical and works for me, pin that in place, and then I create bands of folded pleats to keep the excess in place and looking tidy, pinning in place as I go. Now all that's left to do is to cut off the excess lace and start the hand sewing. For the hand sewing, I started at the top edge, or top seam, worked all the way around, making sure that the thread was only visible on the front at the darker patches of the lace where it would be hidden. After the front came the back seam. I pinned the dress to the form to make sure that the dress itself and all the other seams would stay in place while I sewed around the zipper. I was really careful when I sewed around the zipper, taking tiny stitches to make sure it was neat. Then the really fiddly bit was the sides. I again pinned the dress to the form to keep it solid and in place, only letting the area that I was sewing be released for me to sew. I was again really careful to make sure the only visible stitching was around the blacker parts of the lace. Last but not least was to sew the lace at the bottom of the dress in various sections to make sure it flowed nicely. You can see I also left a big cutout of the lace at the back of the dress to show a bit of the brighter blue satin fabric, which I really liked. And here's the finished dress. I hope you can create dresses of your own, hopefully even better than mine. I'd love to see the results.